I have been making compost piles for many years as the main process for transforming garden, landscape, and household waste into a valuable material for amending the soil in the vegetable gardens. And most of the time, this material heats up quite a bit, which is a sign of active decomposition, and hopefully that there will be fewer weed seeds surviving the composting process to be spread back out into the gardens. But I've often wondered about using this heat for other purposes, and have seen examples of people making large compost piles to provide hot water, or to heat their house, or to simply provide a steady source of warmth for growing tender plants in the spring. This summer, I had the opportunity to experiment with building a compost pile specifically for heating the water for an off-grid shower, which was part of a temporary camping area, and I was really pleased with the results. The composting process involves a wide range of different types and sizes of organisms, but it is the microscopic thermophilic bacteria that do most of the work to create the higher temperatures. These heat-loving microbes are apparently most active in the temperature range between 55 and 70 degrees Celsius, which is hotter than most other organisms can survive. Below this range, other organisms tend to take over most of the decomposition process, and above about 70 degrees Celsius, even the thermophilic bacteria slow down, which generally creates an upper limit on how hot a compost pile can get. And if there is a decent balance between the amount of nitrogen and carbon in the material that is to be composted, the material is broken down into small enough pieces, and there is a large enough volume to allow the heat to build up, and appropriate amounts of air and moisture, then the conditions can be created for these thermophilic bacteria to thrive. And we can adjust the conditions to enable everything to heat up as much as possible, or we can aim to keep the temperature in a lower range, depending on what we want to achieve. In this case, I wanted to create as much heat as possible and to be able to extract it when needed, and I wanted the heat to last for more than a week, but I figured even slightly warm water would be adequate. The context for this experiment was a 10-day-long permaculture course, which included 15 to 20 campers in an area right beside the Red Gardens, which was also the focus for part of the course. Although the campers had access to one shower in a nearby building, we wanted to improve the facilities by creating another shower closer to the camping area, where there was access to municipal tap water but no electricity supply nearby. So this was an opportunity to build a compost pile filled with grass and rough material that was gathered from clearing the areas for the campsite and mowing the grass from the area, and to use the heat from this compost pile to heat the water for an off-grid outdoor shower. To start everything, I dug a few holes and filled them with stones, set a pallet as a base on top of this soakaway, and built a simple wooden frame for a shower cubicle on top of this base, which was lined with tarps for privacy. We had proper mixing taps and shower head to use, with the cold water connected to the pipe bringing water down to the area. And another long length of pipe was teed off of this supply pipe to coil through the compost pile before being attached to the hot water tap. It was a simple system powered by the pressure of the municipal water supply, with both hot and cold running water, if the compost heated up as expected and enough heat was able to be extracted. I built a container for a vertical compost pile out of a welded wire mesh tied together in order to create a cylinder about 1.2 meters high and 1.2 meters in diameter, which would enclose a volume of about 1.35 cubic meters. The wire mesh frame was placed directly on the ground, with the start of the long coil of pipe coming out of the cylinder from the bottom and fed out through the top. I filled the compost with alternating layers of rough material that had been scythed to clear the area, and grass clippings from mowing the main lawn area around the gardens. The rough material included older grasses, nettles, and other plants, which would hopefully serve as a decent source of carbon and allow more air to penetrate into the pile, and the grass clippings would provide a lot of nitrogen and enable the pile to heat up quickly. After each layer of the rough materials and finer clippings, I laid down another loop of the long coil of pipe, trying to keep it in from the outside edge of the cylinder. I slowly built up these layers of organic material with pipe in between as I cleared more space and mowed the grass. I packed the material down lightly as the cylinder filled in order to be able to fit more in, but not so much that all the air was pressed out. When the cylinder was filled, I watered the material from the top, added some cross braces to keep the cylinder stable, and capped it off with an insulating layer of straw. I fed the end of the long pipe out of the top of the cylinder and connected it to the hot water tap of the shower. Then I wrapped the whole cylinder with a type of compost cover that would keep most of the rain off and hopefully keep in some of the heat, but would let more air in. The next morning, some of the campers had warm showers, and it was great that it worked so quickly. The temperature near the core of the compost cylinder was reading 55 degrees Celsius, but the outer edge, close to where the water pipe was located, was slightly cooler, between 40 and 45 degrees, which is definitely hot enough for a shower. But apparently it didn't heat up as fast enough for another person to have a shower right after one had been finished. By late afternoon, about 24 hours after the compost pile was built, the core temperature was almost 70 degrees, and it peaked at about 74 degrees Celsius the next day, a high temperature that lasted for 3 or 4 days. The temperature of the material around the pipe was closer to 60 degrees, which is too hot for a shower and needed to be mixed with the cold water. When the shower was started, the water ran cold for a short bit, then quickly became too hot to keep your hand under. This lasted for a few minutes until all of the water that had been sitting in the length of pipe buried in the compost pile had passed through. Then the temperature gradually cooled down rather than going cold suddenly. The incoming cold water had a chance to absorb the residual heat from the pipe, but eventually the amount of heat transfer wasn't enough. But if it was left for 10 or 15 minutes, the temperature went back up to approximately where it had been before. I didn't figure out how many showers the compost could heat up in a morning, or what effect it would have on the temperature of the compost, but that would have been an interesting thing to test. About halfway through the course, the temperature of the core of the compost started to fall, and it continued to fall after that. I would have expected this, given the mix of materials that I used, and the usual rise and fall of the temperatures of compost piles that aren't turned or aerated, and I'm not sure what effect removing some of the heat each day would have had on the process. 2 weeks after starting the compost, the temperature at the core was still 52 degrees Celsius, with the temperature around the pipes closer to 32 degrees. I ran the tap and found that it produced about 5 liters of water that was 33 degrees Celsius, which is a bit cool for a shower, but still usable. I finally got around to dismantling it a week later, or 3 weeks after starting the compost, and the material had shrunk to about 25% of the original volume, with the coil of pipe compressing with it. The outside of the cylinder was quite dry, and the core was a mix of sections of grass clippings that had compressed into a wet mass, and the rougher material being much drier in sections. I had removed the cover, and it had rained quite a bit, which definitely didn't help. The concentrated sections of this nitrogen-rich grass clippings had really helped heat everything up really quickly, which was what I wanted, but it probably would have lasted longer if the materials had been mixed in together a lot more. But considering that the pile hadn't been turned or aerated, it was close to what I would have expected. Pulling the pipe out from the matted, long, rough material was a bit difficult, and I had to move a lot of the layers to the side by hand, but it all came apart fairly cleanly, and the pipe and wire mesh are ready to use again in the future. In the end, the compost did what was intended. It provided hot showers, or at least warm showers, over a 10-day period, though I didn't get an approximate number of how many showers it actually heated. People were delighted with the unusual experience, and it was also a good teaching opportunity, and I was happy that this first attempt was successful. But there are, of course, some improvements that I would make if I ever did it again, the easiest of which would be to use a longer coil of pipe. If I doubled the length of pipe buried in the compost, it would almost double the amount of water that was available for longer showers. I think it would also allow for more frequent showers, as the incoming cold water would have more time to absorb the residual heat of the pipe. I think I would also coil every second loop of the pipe closer to the center of the compost, which would extract more heat from the hot core. Mixing the material before filling the cylinder would improve things, and shredding or chipping all of the material first would make it easier to load and to take apart, and allow for woodier material to be added. I think more care in all of this would help the heat of the compost to last longer, though it might take a few days for the compost to really heat up at first. And wrapping the cylinder with a thicker insulated blanket would help retain the heat, but it might be easier to make a wider cylinder with a greater diameter out of the wire mesh, and to pack straw into the outside perimeter. But then it would become more important to provide enough air to the core of the compost, either with a blower or perforated pipes. but it would be important to do it in such a way that it didn't cool down the compost pile too much. I learned a lot making this off-grid shower that was heated by compost pile, and I also gained a better understanding about composting in general, especially about how to control the amount of heat that is generated. I had thought that the higher the temperature, the faster the decomposition would take place, but now I realize that the maximum rate of decomposition actually occurs at a slightly lower temperature range. When the heat rises too close to the limit of about 73 degrees Celsius, the rate of decomposition slows right down until enough heat dissipates or is extracted so that the bacteria can become much more active again. And this is something that we can control to a certain extent, depending on what the purpose of the compost pile is. So if I want to store the hot water for occasional use in a shower, I would want to insulate the pile to try to get the temperature as high as possible so that there is a store of water available. But if I want to extract heat continuously, to get as much heat as possible from the process, to help to heat a house for example, it would be better to try to remove the heat at a rate that keeps the temperature within the ideal range in which the thermophilic bacteria are most active. If I want to take advantage of the ambient warmth to grow tender seedlings on top of a compost pile in the spring, then I perhaps won't want to heat it up so much, but to use a mix of materials that would stretch out this heat for several months. If, on the other hand, I wanted to use a composting process to destroy weeds, seeds, or disease organisms in plants, or to quickly process a large amount of material, then frequent turning could be a much more important factor. But if I want to make the best possible compost, with the maximum benefit for vegetable plants, a lower temperature and much greater oxygen flow right through the center of the material might be a lot better. I still have a lot of explorations to do in order to better achieve that last one, but making compost in a different context with radically different objectives has helped me to understand everything a little bit better. And it was great to be able to provide the facility for an off-grid shower in the process, but now I'm beginning to wonder what else I can use that heat for. Most of the videos on this channel are about growing vegetables, but I do find it interesting to be able to explore related areas, especially if I'm able to share all the cool and interesting things that I learn. But that's what this Red Gardens project is all about, exploring a wide range of different issues and methods, trying to gain a better understanding about the complex interrelationships between all the various factors and issues that are involved in growing vegetables. And then to share them as wide as I can in hopes to be able to help more people grow more of their own food. If you value the work that I do and like the videos that I make, it would be great if you would consider supporting me and this channel through Patreon or PayPal. But more importantly, thank you for watching.